repeat some things about myself. So I'm working as a research director at the University of Helsinki, also in this Institute for Atmospheric and Earth System Research, same institute as Dimitri and Xenia are working with me. And I'm currently the director of our master's program in atmospheric sciences. Earlier, I used to be also the coordinator for our doctoral program. Actually, the dealing with many of the duties Sini is now working with. But the reason I am giving this presentation here today, so I will talk about the European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System, the ECTS, that has been mentioned a couple of times already. So that the reason I am the one talking about this is that I have been involved in quite a few programs or starting new programs on master's and also doctoral level over the past 15 years. So I will try to give you the European context in this presentation. I will keep it on a quite basic level, and I believe that many of the things are familiar to you. I will start with the history of ECTS and just mention the simple pedagogical principle behind it. Then I will present the key features, the most important features of the ECTS, and how that can be utilized in designing a program. And in the end, I will talk a bit about core and transferable skills from one perspective. Those are also things that have been mentioned already in earlier presentations. But let's, okay, yeah, so this is actually a nice coincidence. A major source for this presentation has been the ECTS User's Guide, and the present version of it was actually approved in Ministers of Education meeting which was held in Yerevan, Armenia, conveniently about 5 years ago. You can easily find this book online from the European Commission website, or simply writing it in Google. But next, the history. So ECTS as such has a history of about 30 years now. So it was first introduced in connection with a mobility program, with the Erasmus exchange program, to make it easier for students to transfer studies that they did during exchange period to their home institute. And some 10 years later, there was the Sorbonne Declaration that where it was first mentioned that we should build Europe of knowledge. That later on in the terminology changed to European Higher Education Area, which still exists as a term, and it is strongly related to the Bologna process, which was started 1 year later, back in 1999, with the Bologna Declaration. And all of these are tightly bound to each other. So basically the European Higher Education Area is the area where the Bologna process is in effect. And the Bologna process has ECTS as one of the main objectives and tools to harmonize higher education in this area. So back in 1999, when it was started, it was basically European Union countries and some others. And gradually it has grown to cover, in principle, pretty much all of the European countries, for 48 countries that are in the Bologna process right now, including all the modest project partners, where Finland, Latvia, UK, and then Poland were aboard from the beginning, Russia joining a couple of years later, followed by Armenia, and Belarus is one of the newest partners or participants in the Bologna process, joined in 2015. Here you can see it on the map. So it's basically all Europe, and actually geographically most of Asia as well as the whole Russia. Russia belongs to it. So just briefly about the pedagogical principles. So there's not very kind of specific pedagogical principle behind ECTS other than the student-centered learning. That is a kind of widely accepted way of thinking about learning, that the student or the learner should have a quite active role, and emphasis being on critical and analytical learning and understanding, which is quite important in higher education, and emphasizing the responsibility and accountability of the student, and also the autonomy of the student, and taking a reflective approach to the learning and teaching process, covering both the student and the teacher side. So this is basically the pedagogical principle. I know that there are lots of pedagogical theories, and I think that this Bologna process countries or the European higher education area has made quite a wise move not to tie themselves in one of these, let's say, pedagogical theories, other than this one, which is quite widely accepted. More about the ECTS, some key features. So it is defined as a, or let's say it's bound to time. And the basic definition is that 60 ECTS credits should correspond to 1 full academic year of work. This varies a bit. I think in Finland it's 1,600 hours. In some other countries, a little bit different, but usually between 1,500 and 1,800 hours of work within a year. Another key feature is learning outcome. Sini will talk more about learning outcomes in a more concrete way on different levels. But what it means, it's a statement of what the learner knows, understands, and is able to do when he or she has completed a learning process. That can be a course, it can be a degree, depends on which level we are talking about. As I said, ECTS credit is based on workload, so it's based on the time that learner needs to accomplish the learning activities related to each learning component. How to award the credits should be, according to ECTS, be defined by national authorities. This is also to make it somehow well, first of all, transparent, and then kind of equal throughout, at least throughout each country, so that there's not much local variation. Then about accumulating credits, it means that we have a degree that includes a certain number of ECTS credits, and students typically accumulate credits by taking, for example, courses and other study units, each of which have a set number of credits related to those. And when they have finished them all, they obtain a qualification like a degree, or also personal achievement. It doesn't have to be a degree. Then this is basically the starting point for the whole ECTS, was the transfer of credits between institutes and also from one context to another. And the ECTS has kind of plenty of documentation, supporting documents, and there are guidelines for each of them, like course catalog, learning agreement, transcript of records, work placement certificate for the work placement and internships, and diploma supplement. So these are the most important key features of ECTS. When we look at it from the program design perspective, like for example setting up a doctoral program in the ECTS context, so it provides tools. That's quite important feature of the ECTS. There are quite specific and useful and clearly written guidelines how you should define program level learning outcomes, the program structure, allocation of credits, meaning distribution of credits between different study units. Also, when following the ECTS formalism, it includes defining general principles of learning, teaching, and assessment. This can be separately on program level and on a study unit, such as course level. And also monitoring and quality assurance are included here. Now, one thing which is quite important to realize here when we know that ECTS credit is related to the workload, but the workload is for a certain task. It is of course different, for example, of a bachelor student or PhD student. So in order to make this categorization between the levels for each learning task, we need so-called level descriptors, and I will talk about them next. There are two frameworks. They are not competing. They are actually usually used side by side. The first one is the framework for qualifications of the European higher education area, and it basically defines the kind of comparative scale of different levels of studies. So by short cycle qualifications, we mean this kind of usually below degree scale set of studies. But then the first, second, and third cycle qualifications correspond to be Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, and PhD correspondingly. And this QF framework, this basically just as I said, it sets the comparative scale of each of these. Whereas the other one, the European qualifications framework for lifelong learning, also called EQF, defines these qualifications on different levels. So for higher education, the kind of most important and relevant levels are 6, 7, and 8 that correspond to bachelor, master, and PhD level studies. So we within this project we are mainly talking about the level 8, which is the highest. But it's also, I will just note here that these are not, you don't have to define, for example, for each course a specific level, or let's say it can include several levels. So for example, in Helsinki, we have actually most of the advanced courses, they belong to both level 7 and 8. And this is possible in these frameworks. And I think I have used most of my time, but a few words about the core and transferable skills that have been mentioned. In this morning's presentations, there were this term soft skills mentioned quite a few times. And this is sometimes seen as the same as transferable skills, but I would say, in my view, that many of the transferable skills are actually quite hard skills. So I would prefer to use this term transferable skills. And difference between the core and transferable skills is that core skills, basically when we talk about doctoral education, is that one should, during the studies, get a deep knowledge about the research topic, learn a good conduct of scientific work, and learn to carry out independent scientific research. I think this is quite clear and the case in the doctoral programs generally. And product to demonstrate these skills is the doctoral thesis. Whereas the transferable skills, as I see, it's a set of skills that can be applied on a range of fields and tasks, either scientific or non-scientific, academic or non-academic. And this is also what Xenia was talking about in her presentation a bit. And to demonstrate the transferable skills, how this is usually kind of proven is the degree certificate and its supplement that should aim to give some information about the transferable skills. And here I give one example. I think this used to be the list of transferable skills of our doctoral program some 10 years ago when we prepared this list. And note that this is just one example, so this is not the only truth at all. But you can notice that let's say tasks or skills 5 to 10 are maybe these that are often considered as soft skills, and those are important, yes. But it is quite important to note that many employers, also non-academic employers, very much appreciate skills like modeling, data analysis, big data methods, instrument technology, and working in the field. That all of them, for example, they are included in our doctoral training. And thus, at least I call them transferable skills as well. And it's possible to combine even on a course level. So there's an example of a 1-2 week research-oriented intensive course. I think Sini will also show something related to this course in her presentation next. But we made a small study about how students themselves felt they learned during this kind of course. And we studied especially transferable skills, namely data analysis, report and article writing, oral presentation, learning and teaching, and time management skills. And we have published a paper on this, which you can find. And this is quite a complicated picture. I'm not going into details, but I will just show that this course period of 2 weeks is now limited with these thick vertical lines on the left and right, and here demonstrated that there are only very few lectures during the course. So actually, so low number as 4. So this is what we call vertical teaching. But what students do during this 2-week period is that they move between forming questions and knowledge building, which are clearly involved in this core skill part, and data analysis in this particular course, which is more like a transferable skills. And here with this curve, basically see how they generally move between these. So you can see that it's somehow interplay, very much integrated, learning both transferable and core skills at the same time. So what we did in this study, we made one survey before the course and another after the course to all the students to make them assess their own learning, and then found this is a multidisciplinary course, so that's what they enjoyed quite a bit. They were working in small groups, and they did feel that they learned also transferable skills during the course, especially data analysis. And also one thing that was important is that they liked a lot that they got to work with real research questions and real data. Okay, this is where I'm going to end. Yeah, I guess I don't need to read it out aloud. You are able to read. I think I'm over time already. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Sorry. Just one question. It concerns of the amount or maybe percentage of face-to-face learning. I mean, how many face-to-face learning in percentage to the whole amount of hours your students have during your PhD program, PhD education in a year? So you tell that 1,500 or 1,800 hours is the academic year. Yeah, it means that your students should work during the year about this amount of hours. Yeah,
Yes.
it could be lectures, seminars, and their own themselves work. Yeah, and
Yes.
so what about face-to-face in percentage?
It's a very good question, and actually, I don't think we have tried to count the hours or make any recommendation, but I think it is quite big. Taking into account, Dimitri mentioned these guidance groups that we are having in our program, meaning that there are these weekly or bi-weekly meetings of between the students and the supervisors, and also I think our students are, I mean, the peer learning, them doing things together. It has quite a big role. So I would say that it is because it's kind of, I mean, and then there is, I mean, this now is related more to this kind of research part, and not this kind of coursework part. It's slightly different, I think. But I would say that it is. I would say it is.
Take just only one discipline, for example. Yeah, if the whole course is, for example, 72 hours or any amount of hours, how many face-to-face in one discipline, for example?
Okay, this was an intensive course that I mentioned that has lots of face-to-face. I mean, I think it is more than 12 hours per day face-to-face working. But on a typical classroom course, we have this kind of one period courses. One teaching period is 7 weeks, and there we usually have 6 hours of contact teaching per week. But of course, on these courses, especially on the advanced level, I think that on many courses it's encouraged that students work together and solve the exercises and other tasks together in groups outside this contact teaching sessions. So even there it's more than that. But I would say so. A typical 5 ECTS course, that is a classroom course with us, it involves 42 hours of contact teaching, and the total workload is supposed to be for 5 ECTS about 130 hours. So that basically means about 30% of contact teaching plus maybe some group work of students, which increases the percentage. But I would say that it's kind of throughout the way. I think it is dozens of percent